What's up guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Realistic TM. It's episode number 105. We start this off with the injury news of Pedri, who of course went down in our win over Eibar in the last game. And last episode is indeed a broken toe for our 91 rated 25-year-old central midfielder. You know, Pedri in this team, what he does kind of goes unnoticed, but 91 overall, consistently always does well, rarely puts a foot wrong. And it's true, you don't really see the guy getting involved much in the build-ups to our goals because he tends to sit deeper. You know, Frankie this season has been much more involved on the offensive end, getting further forward, getting involved in the goals and the assists, but Pedri just seems to sit back, protect the back three, give it an extra layer of protection. As you see our fixtures coming here in January, 3 in the league, and the Supercopa against Villarreal as well. And also, real briefly too, unfortunately I couldn't find the animation for the draw for the Champions League last 16, but there it is for you there. We of course finished runners-up, and our opponents will be Liverpool in the last 16, the first knockout round of the Champions League. The group winners, Leverkusen, are away at the Stadio San Paolo against Napoli. So yeah, for us finishing runners-up, that means we'll take on Liverpool, who won their group. And look, Barcelona versus Liverpool is just an epic European tie, isn't it? So many amazing games over the years, and so recently as well, during Liverpool's run to winning it a couple of years ago. Of course, that incredible, miraculous turnaround victory in the second leg, 4-0, I think it was, when Divock Origi, of course, scored that late goal. I think he scored 2 goals in that game, didn't he? Of course, the late goal, one of the most memorable goals I can actually remember in recent years in the Champions League, and that's saying something, because what I remember most was not the goal scorer, but the goal provider, Trent Alexander-Arnold, that fantastic dummy, fake, walk away from the corner flag and quickly run back to it, take it, catch the Barca defenders napping, and Origi was alert to turn in from close range. That's just a memorable goal in a memorable game, a memorable tie, and we got them once again, Liverpool, in the first knockout round of the Champions League. But yeah, real briefly on Pedri, you know, you don't normally see what this guy does in the team because he's the sort of guy that he's very quiet. You know, he's like a mouse out there. You don't really notice him, but he's always around and he just does what he needs to do, you know. He's the mouse. He's the mouse of the team. Pedri the mouse, but he just does what he needs to do. Just spreads the ball forward to the more creative players. And again, that's why you don't really see him getting the goals or the assists, but he protects the back line and just does the simple things really, really well. Regardless, he's out for 3 months, so it does mean that we can put in the youth player that we signed from Inter Milan, Garcia Marin, into our first 11, get him some more game time, some more exposure, and hopefully see some development as well. He's 87 overall. Ricky is a rating higher, but I want to prioritise the youth player and see what he can do in Pedri's absence. Still, 41st game of 4 in today's episode was indeed the first one of the new calendar year, taking on Villarreal in the Supercopa. And of course, last season, our first taste of the Supercopa, we were knocked out in the semis by our El Clasico rivals Real Madrid away at the Bernabeu. And you know, as we know, the Supercopa, it's the winners and the runners-up of the top 2 domestic competitions in Spain. So the winners and the runners-up of the Liga, and the winners and the runners-up of the Copa del Rey. So, you know, heading into the Supercopa semi-final, unlike last year, we progressed to the final with a 3-1 victory. Cucurella scored our first, then Abreu Ansu Fati sent us through to the final to take on Atletico Madrid. Obviously, the Supercopa in recent years expanded from what was, of course, traditionally just the 2 teams to the 4-team competition it's now become in January. I don't necessarily look down on the competition and say it's not like a major honour, if you will. But as we know, in recent years, they sold the rights to have the competition played in Saudi Arabia, taking it away from the country, Spain, of course, where it would, of course, be traditionally played. To me, I just think it's like a notch below the other major honours in Spain, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? I hope it does. But, you know, like Liga and Copa del Rey, obviously, you know, nowadays, as we know, the Cup is probably not considered as quite as important as the league nowadays in most of the major European countries for football. But to me, like I said, if you're going to put La Liga and Copa del Rey in their own bracket as the 2 major honours, the Supercopa sort of falls below that, if you know what I mean. It's not the sort of competition which you look back on the end of the season, if you win that La Liga and Copa del Rey, you sort of don't put it in the same bracket as La Liga and Copa del Rey. You know, that's how I've sort of always seen it, really. So that's why last season, when we lost in the semis to Real Madrid, I wasn't really that fussed because I knew we could still have a chance at a treble. and in the end we won a domestic double. But to me, those 2 trophies meant far more than the Supercopa anyway. But this season, I did want to have a better showing than last year. I did want to at least reach the final, which we did after our win over Villarreal. And heading into this game as well, we scored 1 goal in the first half, then Leandro with a sensational strike in the second to make it 2-0. And while João Felix would capitalise on what was a shocking piece of, I don't know, overconfidence from me. I'm not entirely sure what I was doing there really with Bilbao Arteta. Felix got Atletico back in the game, but thankfully it turned out to be nothing other than a consolation goal. And I really like the fact that as well the 2 goal scorers in this game were the 2 stars of the season, Ansu Fati and now his right-hand man, Leandro Ahmed. They both scored our 2 goals in the game. And a 2-1 victory, and there it is, our first Supercopa victory of the series, as we do pick up the trophy we failed to win last season. So, you know, again, it's a trophy and it's in the cabinet, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's you know, a novelty, nothing like that. But again, to me, like, I could take it or leave it. Of course you want to take it, you want to take every trophy, don't you? Want to win everything, but it's not the sort of trophy that, again, we're going to sit back at the end of the season and say, that's the one I remember, that's the one. You know, when you hang your boots up at the end of your career, you don't sit and say, that's the trophy I was most proud of winning, you know. So yeah, glad to have it, glad to take success and pick up another winner's medal in this series to add to what we've won so far. But again, we know for a fact that there are far bigger fish to fry, and that's retaining our domestic double and, of course, going for the Champions League, which we yet to win in this series as well. Still, following the victory, we did see there the draw for the Copa del Rey last 32. Of course, we had a hold. We got Granada away from home. And also a bit for Ricky as well. Spurs picking a bid of 77 million, I think it was, for our central midfielder. We bought back from, I think it was, funny enough, Liverpool, wasn't it, at the start of last season. But of course, we reject it. Ricky is like our 4th choice CM, behind, of course, De Jong and Pedri, the dynamic duo. And then, of course, Garcia Marina is now being preferred to Ricky, due to him being a youth player and a couple years younger as well. But I quite like Ricky. I used him before last year, and he's an excellent passer at the ball. So he doesn't play that much. When he does, it's like he always maintains a 100% pass accuracy, you know. So I'm going to keep him here. No plans to sell him. Don't need to sell him, you know. Heading into the January window, again, we've got around 35 million, but we don't really need to do any business right now. The team's flying, you know. In all competitions, we might as well just keep the team's ears and not look to make major changes. But yeah, for the 3rd game of today's episode, it will be Deportivo Alaves back in La Liga after the promotion last season in the game. Took a very early 2-goal lead in this one as well. Cucurella getting the first, and then Ansu Fati bagging the second, and then 27 minutes in we made it 3 in a really dominant first half. And now Leandro Ahmed with another goal as well, as we went 3 goals up really early on. Now I've sort of made a point of trying to do that this season as well. It's been really competitive this year, a lot more so than last year, but in the first halves of games I want to try and stay in attack mode as much as I can. Look for early goals, look for as many as I can, and try and get some separation. So yeah, leading by 3, and really we could have been like 4, 5, 6 and up at half time. It was just relentless and dominant attacking football from Barcelona. And 5 minutes before the break, Pedro Porro finds Fati. Lovely first time knockoff to Cucurella, and what a finish as well. You would have seen at the start of the episode, Marc has now hit 90 overall. I just noticed that. And this guy is criminally underrated in this team. That's his 5th goal in La Liga already this season, with a brace in this one to go along with Fati and Leandro getting another one each as they're neck and neck right now in the race for the Golden Boot. But Cucurella, man, is just... Seriously, there are certain players, you know, in the teams that I have and the teams that we build and the teams we use that sometimes I just never really give the credit to, and I never really talk about them in the light that I should. But Cucurella is a star in this team at times, man. Not just on the offensive end, but as I mentioned so many times, it's coming to Barcelona. I made a real point of setting the team up in the way they already were set up with a 3-4-2-1, but also making sure those wide midfielders operated as secondary wing backs as well. And that's exactly what Cucurella and Pedro Porro have done, and that's why they've both been so good, and why Porro last season was just an absolute man mountain. I don't think he'll get back to the form he showed last season, but Cucurella on the other side, he's just brilliant, man, on both ends of the pitch, and while we're both great defending and we're going forward as well. Still, for the 4th and final game of today's episode, Granada away, Copa del Rey last 32, again aiming to retain the title that we won last season, along with La Liga. Took the very early lead through Fati, and then Moise Kean bagged our second, and really in the first half of this game it was just a Bilbao Arteta show. And talking to youth players, you mentioned Garcia Marina earlier. Since coming in from Inter, he's the highest rated youth player we've got, alongside Leandro, of course, our new star forward. But I've said it before, I'm so disappointed that this guy just hasn't really developed, because, okay, whilst his game time isn't what you would call consistent, and he's not always in the first 11, he gets quite a lot of it. I'd say he plays once every 2 or 3 games. That's quite a decent amount for an 18-year-old, and whenever he does play, he puts in scintillating performances. He's getting his position changed to left midfield. Wherever he plays, normally left midfield, he does really well, and in this game, man, a goal and 3 assists from our youth prospect. Why he hasn't developed, I do not know, but again, it's something EA needs to look into next season. 4-0 win through to the last 16 of the Copa del Rey, and our charge toward the treble continues. Officially halfway through the season, we've now opened up an 8-point gap on our closest challengers, Atletico Madrid, into the last 16, and of course we know Liverpool in the last 16 at the Champions League as well. But that was this episode of the Really CM, guys. So big thank you, fortunate if you have enjoyed it. If you have, then please do drop a like. Much love to you all. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you for the next episode of the Really CM featuring Transfer Deadline Day very soon.